Welcome friends to this course on understanding absurdist drama. We are in week 4 and this is going to be lecture number 4. Today we will discuss Eugene Ionesco as a playwright. We have already discussed 3 of his major plays, The Bald Soprano, The Chairs and Rhinoceros. On that basis, let us discuss what kind of playwright Ionesco was. Let us begin with how Ionesco defines theatre. For Ionesco, theatre is simply what cannot be expressed by any other means, a complexity of words, movements, gestures that convey a vision of the world inexpressible in any other way. In other words, theatre for Ionesco is not merely constituted by verbosity of the words. It also involves the gestural performance, movement of the actors on the stage, and there are deeper symbolical meanings that a theatre performance seems to have. Ionesco is very clear that the goal of a dramatist is not to give any didactic message. As he says, a playwright simply writes plays in which he can offer only a testimony, not a didactic message. Any work of art which was ideological and nothing else would be pointless, inferior to the doctrine it claimed to illustrate, which would already have been expressed in its proper language, that of discursive demonstration. An ideological play can be no more than vulgarization of an ideology. Thus, for Ionesco, theatre is not a space for discursive demonstration of a particular ideology. Whether it is leftist ideology or rightist ideology, it does not interest Ionesco as a playwright. For him, a play is an aesthetic performance which must be bereft of all kinds of political ideologies. In fact, Ionesco is very critical of the word ideology itself. For him, ideology is like a blinker which forces human beings not to see the realities of human existence. Ionesco rightly says, ideologies separate us, dreams and anguish bring us together. And therefore, when we read the plays of Ionesco, our focus should be more on how Ionesco represents dreams and anguish of man in his plays. By now, you must be aware that the plays of Ionesco are existentialist. They talk about futility of human life. Ionesco, like Beckett and other absurdist playwright, is aware that life is meaningless, that ultimately, inevitably, it will lead us towards death. Ionesco writes, and I quote, "Man in fact is petty. The problem of death is a human problem. A cow does not think about death. A cow is not petty." So, Ionesco seems to suggest that problems of life and death for human beings are outcome of human consciousness. They perhaps do not affect animals in the manner they affect human beings. And because human beings constantly confront the boredom of life, the monotony of life, and they are conscious that ultimately they are going to die, they suffer from the problem of nothingness or the anxiety of nothingness. Defining nothingness, Ionesco writes, "Nothing is mightier than our why. Nothing stands above it, because in the end there is a why to which no answer is possible. In fact, from why to why, from one step to the next, you get to the end of things. And it is only by traveling from one why to the next, as for the why that is unanswerable, that man attains the level of creative principle facing the infinite, equal to the infinite may be." Like Albert Camus, Ionesco argues that this idea of absurdity of life arises when a man asks, why is he living? What is the purpose of life? For Ionesco, the word why becomes very important because human beings move from one why to another why, from one question to another question. But human beings also have to understand that there is no end to why. There comes a moment in the life of man when he cannot any longer answer the last why. Ionesco says, and I quote, "So long as he can answer why, he gets lost. He loses his way among things. Why this? I answer because that. From one explanation to the next, I reach the point where no explanation is satisfying. From one explanation to the next, I reach zero, absolute, where truth and falsehood are equivalent. They become equal to one another, are identified with one another, cancel each other out in the face of absolute nothing. And so we can understand how all action, all choice, all history is justified at the end of time by a final cancelling out. The why goes beyond everything. Nothing goes beyond the why, not even the nothing, because nothing is not the explanation. When silence confronts us, the question to which there is no answer rings out in the silence. That ultimate why, that great why, is like a light that blots out everything, but a blinding light. Nothing more can be made out. There is nothing more to make out. So Ionesco indicates that human desire for finding out the meaning of life will eventually lead him or her to nothingness. And this moment of nothingness would be a moment when the truth and falsehood will be equal. All histories will be justified, as Ionesco says. Because human beings have to understand that despite their greatness or smallness, they will have to die. Whether they have a long life or short life, they have to die. Whether they do something meaningful or meaningless, they have to die. So death is the ultimate result of human life. And if death is inevitable, an ultimate goal of human life, what human beings do throughout their lives is equally futile, is equally nothing. This nothingness is the moment of silence. It is the moment when all our questions end, when all our whys end. Thus, we can easily understand that Ionesco's plays are dramatizations of that nothingness of life, the absurdity of life, the futility of life, meaninglessness of life. So if there is no meaning of life, if life is meaningless, whether life has any truths to offer or not, that becomes an important question. What is truth? Whether human beings can ever realize the truth of life or not? We start pondering, we start reflecting upon while we are reading the plays of Ionesco. Ionesco does not believe in collective truths, historical truths. He believes in the possibility of an individual discovering his own inner truths. Ionesco writes, and I quote, "I have always been suspicious of collective truths." He further argues that I have always considered imaginative truth to be more profound, more loaded with significance than everyday reality. Everything we dream about, and by that mean everything we desire, is true. There is nothing truer than myth. Reality does not have to be, it is simply what it is. Here we have to understand that for Ionesco, truth is not fact of life. Truth is imaginative. It explores the inner world of a man, his inner anxieties, guilts, regrets. And that's what exactly Ionesco tries to present in his dramas. Quite often, this discovery of inner truth by an individual is often at loggerheads with what Ionesco calls social truths or historical truths. And that's why in his plays, we have a constant conflict between individuals' desire for freedom and society's desire from an individual to conform to its ideals. Society in Ionesco's plays is often repressive. It tries to curtail human freedoms, and because of that, human beings constantly suffer. Talking about this conflict between freedom and society, Ionesco writes, and I quote, "In the history of humanity, there are no civilizations or cultures which fail to manifest in one or thousand ways this need for an absolute that is called heaven, freedom, a miracle, a lost paradise to be regained, peace, or going beyond history. There is no religion in which everyday life is not considered a prison. There is no philosophy or ideology that does not think that we live in alienation. Humanity has always had a nostalgia for the freedom that is only beauty, that is only real life, plenitude, light. It is evident that for Ionesco, society is a prison, and in this prison, all human beings are trapped. They are suffering. They want to break away from this prison, but they cannot. In fact, in the play Rhinoceros, this imprisonment of man is the central theme. People transforming in Rhinoceros symbolize people falling into the traps of mass conformity or falling to the hysteria of collective truth. Although Ionesco suggests that society is a threat, yet he is aware that it cannot be avoided. Ionesco writes, and I quote, "I believe what separates us from all one another is simply society itself, or if you like, politics. This is what raises barriers between men. This is what creates misunderstanding. If I may be allowed to express myself paradoxically, I should say that truest society, the authentic human community, is extra-social. A wider, deeper society, that which is revealed by our common anxieties, our desires, our secret nostalgias. The whole history of the world has been governed by nostalgias and anxieties, which political action does no more than reflect and interpret very imperfectly. No society has been able to abolish human sadness. No political system can deliver us from the pain of living, from our fear of death, our thirst for absolute. It is the human condition that directs the social condition, not vice versa." For Ionesco, society is a barrier between one man and another man. Due to several political, social, cultural and moral norms, it creates conditions of suffocating existence for man. Although societies argue that they have created these institutions to fulfill the life of man, to make his or her life happy, but that does not happen, and man constantly and continuously suffers. Ionesco argues that true, authentic communication between one man and another man is possible only in the extra-social space, which is beyond the social space human beings inhabit. This extra-social space is created by shared anxieties, shared guilts, shared fears, which connect one human being with the other human being. However, Ionesco is conscious that this extra-social space is merely a theoretical possibility. He is conscious that man has to live with alienation, with a sense of suffering. No political system, no religious institution can ever emancipate man from the pain of life. To represent this tragic absurdity of human life, Ionesco creates peculiar characters. These characters are aware that they are leading meaningless lives. They are aware that words they speak are meaningless and nonsensical, yet they speak, yet they live. Ionesco writes, and I quote, "Not so with our characters. They have no metaphysics, no order, no law. They are miserable and they don't know why. They are puppets, undone. In short, they represent modern man. Their situation is not tragic, since it has no relation to a higher order. Instead, it is ridiculous, laughable and derisory." So, Ionesco suggests that the life of a modern man is characterized by ridiculousness. The life of a modern man, Ionesco argues, has lost its tragic dimensions because humanity has totally disconnected itself from any transcendental order. If you read his plays like The Bald Soprano, where you have characters like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Martin, they are so absurd that despite living together in the same bedroom, they are unaware that they are husband and wives. They fail to recognize each other. This shows alienation of modern man from one another. However, we have to understand that their situation is not tragic. Rather, it is comic and absurd, marked by ridiculousness. You would also recall the chairs where we meet an elderly couple who are 95 and 94 years old. They are arranging chairs for the invisible guests. The old man wants to deliver a message. But at the end of the play, we are shocked to find out that the message of the old man is nonsensical. Don't you think so? This symbolizes that the old man, despite having lived quite a long life, is without substance. Words that he seems to speak appear to be meaningless. The old man, as Ionesco says, is miserable and he does not know why. In Rhinoceros as well, the entire town is being transformed into rhinoceroses, but no one knows why it is happening so. Ionesco's characters are central to the themes and techniques of absurdist theatre. They are often ordinary people reflecting a universal human condition. They are not heroic or exceptional but mirror the banalities of everyday life, like Mr. and Mrs. Smith in The Bald Soprano or Berenger in Rhinoceros. They grapple with essential questions about the meaning of life, the inevitability of death, and absurdity of existence. Ionesco not only deconstructs human life but also human language. Ionesco is aware that so many crimes are committed in the name of words. Words are not innocent, words are not powerless, they have a lot of influence over human action and human behavior. Because of words, humanity is suffering. And therefore, Beckett wants his audience to understand that words need to be used carefully and cautiously. Ionesco writes, and I quote, "Beckett shows death. His people are in dustbins or waiting for Godot. Similarly, in my play, The New Tenant, there is no speech, or rather, the speeches are given to the janitor. The tenant just suffocates beneath proliferating furniture and objects, which is a symbol of death. There were no longer words being spoken, but images being visualized. We achieved it above all by the dislocation of language. Beckett destroys language with silence. I do it with too much language, with characters talking at random and by inventing words." So, for Ionesco, dislocation of language is essential in theatre. Beckett has done that destruction of language with silence, but Ionesco has chosen a different aesthetics. His characters talk too much, they talk repetitively, they indulge in random conversations, and all that has symbolic significance. Ionesco seems to suggest that language cannot reveal the truths of life. Language can never represent our inner core. The human soul cannot express itself through words. Why? Because words are masks. They hide the reality of human experience. Therefore, like Dadaists and Surrealists, Ionesco too wanted that language should be freed, language should be liberated. And this liberation of language would be possible when its absurdity, when its meaninglessness, when its nonsensicality is exposed by words. Ionesco's characters often repeat words or phrases, creating a sense of monotony and highlighting the breakdown of meaningful communication. His plays frequently defies logic, turning into gibberish or absurd exchanges. Ionesco also employs linguistic games, including puns and double meanings, to create humor and draw attention to inevitability of language. The goal of all this is to disintegrate language. When you read the message of the orator in the play The Chairs, who says mum 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 mum, you would be reminded of Jara's play The Gas Heart, where the character says isn't it, isn't it, isn't it, isn't it, isn't it, isn't it, and so on. The use of these words, which appear to be nonsensical, are deliberately used by absurd dramatists, including Ionesco. Ionesco says, none of us would have written as we do without Surrealism and Dadaism. By liberating the language, these movements paved the way for us. Therefore, we can easily understand how dramatic aesthetics of Ionesco was influenced by the two avant-garde movements, Dadaism and Surrealism. Ionesco has often been described as anti-realist, although he constantly denies this label. Whether his dramatic aesthetics is anti-realist or not is a very important question to reflect upon. And what Ionesco means by the word realism and anti-realism is also an important consideration. Why Ionesco is against realism? Why does he want to break away from the realist traditions of playwriting is something that we are going to reflect upon now. To discuss this, I quote Ionesco. Ionesco says, realism falls short of reality. It shrinks it, attenuates it, falsifies it. It does not take into account our basic truths and our fundamental obsessions, love, death, astonishment. It presents man in reduced and strange perspective. Truth is in our dreams, in the imagination. Now this is a very important question. Where lies the truth of man? Whether the truth of man is external, it can be found outside, it can be found somewhere else. Whether searching for truth, man should look outward, or should man look inward, into his dreams, into his desires, into his fantasies, into his regrets, into his guilts. Where can man find out his truth? According to Ionesco, the truth of man is inward. Unless man goes deeper into his mind, unless man searches his own soul, he cannot find out the truth of life. And because the truth of life lies inside, man's search for truth outside is futile. And that's why Ionesco rejects realism, because realism is concerned with outer truth, external truth. It does not include the inner truth of man that can be found in his dreams, nightmares and fantasies. Ionesco further says, and I quote, "The light of memory, or rather the light that memory leads to things, is the palest light of all. I am not quite sure whether I am dreaming or remembering, whether I have lived my life or dreamed it. Just as dreams do, memory makes me profoundly aware of the unreality, the evanescence of the world, a fleeting image in the moving water." When we go deeper into this quote, we understand that Ionesco's focus is more on the representation of mind. And when Ionesco represents mind, he focuses more on human desires which are future oriented and memories which are past oriented. When human beings recollect their memories, whether these memories are real or not, whether what has happened in the past and which is being recollected by the memory, is that real or not? That becomes an important question. Memory, Ionesco suggests, makes human beings aware of the unreality of the world. Like our memories are unreal, so is the world. The world is fleeting, it is temporal like our memories. This ephemeral nature of the world cannot be understood unless human beings are distinct from the venality of human life. Ionesco writes, "We need to be virtually burgeoned into detachment from our daily lives, our habits and mental laziness, which conceal from us the strangeness of the world. Without a fresh virginity of mind, without a new and healthy awareness of the existential reality, there can be no theatre and no art either. The real must be in a way dislocated before it can be reintegrated." Ionesco is conscious that this deconstruction of the banality of human life is essential to represent the life in its wholeness and entirety. The real is a mask. Reality is a falsified apprehension of human life. And unless human beings are shocked, unless human beings are provoked, they cannot know what is real. Let us discuss this with an example of the play Rhinoceros. Townsmen in the play cannot understand why they are turning into rhinoceros. They fail to see that they have become animal-like. They have stopped using their brains. They have not remained individuals. Ionesco uses the metaphor of rhinoceroses to question the sense of reality that these townsmen have. Unless they are provoked, unless they are shocked, they cannot understand what is really happening, what is truly happening. And that's why Ionesco in his plays questions the reality. He questions the banality, monotony of human life. And this questioning of banality and monotony of human life is possible through absurd situations which Ionesco creates in his plays, like the old man and the old woman arranging chairs for the invisible guests who are not arriving. So Ionesco is anti-realist, but what is his metaphysics? Ionesco associated himself with a movement called pataphysics. You would remember our discussion on Alfred Jarry's play Ubu Roy. Alfred Jarry called himself a pataphysician. What is pataphysics? Jarry defined pataphysics as a branch of philosophy or science that examines imaginary phenomena that exist in a world beyond metaphysics. He calls it the science of imaginary solutions. Jean Baudrillard, one of the very famous postmodern philosophers, argues that pataphysics is the imaginary science of our world, the imaginary science of excesses, of excessive, parodic, paroxystic effects, particularly the excess of emptiness and insignificance. In other words, like the absurdist philosophy, pataphysics is also interested in exploring emptiness and insignificance of human life. Don't you think Ionesco was trying to do something similar in his plays when he was trying to explore the absurdity of life, the meaninglessness of life, the purposelessness of human life? Don't you think so? While Ionesco was rejecting universal truths, he was trying to become a pataphysician. His deconstruction of language, use of surreal and non-linear storytelling is also attributed to pataphysical aesthetics. So, pataphysics celebrates the absurd, the imaginary and the nonsensical. In Ionesco's plays, the disintegration of language, the breakdown of communication and surreal scenarios mirror pataphysical humor and defiance of reality. In a sense, Ionesco's plays challenge audiences to rethink the nature of reality, logic and meaning, using absurdity as a powerful lens to explore the human condition, which is certainly pataphysical. So is Ionesco a pessimist? Is Ionesco a nihilist? Is life without beauty? Is life without meaning? What is life for Ionesco? Let us briefly discuss. Ionesco says, and I quote, "Life is beautiful, a whole existence of old papers and office dust, the bed in my hotel room, which often remained unmade from morn till night when I came home from the office, because of the dearth of hire help, the only maid being an aged hunchback who did the best she could, the rude awakenings in the morning, the mad rush to the office in the hope of still finding my time card, the joy at reaching the office on time so that I could sign it, the anger and frustration on those mornings when I reached the office 30 seconds after the card had been taken away. All that seemed to me to be enveloped in a kind of happiness that I had not previously noted, as all of a sudden I found a kind of beauty in the dust, the crowded street, the mass of people hurrying like me to work, the hundreds and hundreds of grey faces, faces which were but clouds, doubtless concealing the sun that we all bear within us if only we knew it. The past is always tender and beautiful, something to be looked upon with sorrow, whose qualities we notice only when they are gone. We need a certain perspective that goes from pen pushers and statesmen alike, millennials or tramps. It is true, we all contain within ourselves a world full of sunshine, a world in which joy is constantly ready and waiting to unfurl if only we realize it. I mean, if only we realize it in time. How lovely ugliness is, how happy sadness and boredom is due to our ignorance. The iciest cold cannot resist the warmth of the human heart, assuming one knows which button to push in order to light it. In short, we look back nostalgically on everything, which proves without question that it was beautiful. So, for Ionesco, life is beautiful only when we realize its meaninglessness and its absurdity. When we realize that each and every moment that we are living is equally significant. The dust, the cloud, the furniture, mass of humanity hurrying towards office is as beautiful as anything else which we consider to be beautiful. The world is full of sunshine, but it is clouded by ignorance. Unless our ignorance is shattered, we cannot understand its true beauty. Ionesco's plays are attempts to destroy these clouds. His plays endeavor to end the ignorance of man. Ionesco suggests that life is misunderstood. We suffer with sorrow. We are unhappy about the lives that we are leading only because we lack proper perspective. Ionesco's plays urge mankind to have a proper perspective on life, and that proper perspective is that life is meaningless, that life is futile, that life is absurd, yet it has to be lived happily. So that's all for today. We'll meet in our next class. Thank you.